The jury in the above entitled action find the defendant, Conrad Robert Murray, guilty of the crime of involuntary manslaughter.
That was a guilty verdict in Dr. Conrad Murray's involuntary manslaughter trial in the death of Michael Jackson. Tomorrow, closing arguments begin in another case related to the singer's death, lawsuit against concert promoter AEG. Jackson's mother and 3 children claim the company is liable in his death because they say it negligently hired Conrad Murray. AEG's lawyers argue that Michael Jackson chose and controlled Dr. Murray. Joining me now is Conrad Murray's attorney, Valerie Weiss. Valerie Weiss, thank you for joining me. How do you think this is all going to unravel? Now we're getting to the end of this trial. Do you think that Conrad Murray may be vindicated?
I think he'll be vindicated in some sense. I don't know that it's going to make a difference as far as his appeal goes, because that's based on the trial record. But in terms of the court of public opinion, I certainly hope he will be vindicated to some degree.
What have we learned new in this civil action that we maybe didn't hear in the criminal case? It could change people's thinking.
Well, a lot of evidence that was excluded at the criminal trial came out in the civil trial, such as evidence of Michael Jackson's dire financial situation, evidence of his decades use of opioids, and the fact that he'd received propofol infusions back in the 90s.
And what is the significance of all that for this particular trial?
For the civil trial or for the criminal trial? I'm sorry.
For the civil trial, what is the significance of that new material that was unearthed in this particular case?
Well, I certainly think that it points that Jackson is culpable for his own death, or at least to a large degree.
Where do you, as Conrad Murray's attorney, where do you see his own culpability as being inarguable?
Well, I believe that he may have done some things that were viewed as negligent, but I do not believe that he is responsible for Michael Jackson's death in any way. Because
you think that Michael Jackson was 50 years old, he'd been taking these kind of drugs for a very long time, and was quite persistent in making sure that he got them.
Exactly. Perhaps my client should have walked away when he encountered the situation that he was unaware of when he left his practice and became Jackson's physician. But in that case, Jackson would have gotten the drugs from someone else, and my client tried to help him.
He's been, pretty much a hate figure since he was convicted, and he's about to come out of prison after serving just over 2 years of the 4-year sentence. How has he coped with going from, I interviewed some of his patients, and he was hugely popular with them, and his reputation up to this point had been impeccable. How is he dealing with the damage to his reputation and the public hostility that comes when you are deemed culpable for the death of a legend like Michael Jackson?
It's very difficult. I mean, he's very isolated right now, and being in jail has been probably the most difficult thing he's ever had to undergo in his life. He's looking forward to addressing a lot of these issues when he gets out and speaking the truth. But it has been very difficult for him to sit there and have to listen to everything all over again in the civil trial. And in this trial, he has no representation.
Does he wish he'd never got involved with Michael Jackson?
Well, I think that would be a logical conclusion. And Jackson was his friend, but he did not know the situation in which he found himself. And he has stated many times that if he knew that Jackson was a drug addict, he never would have given up his practices to become Michael Jackson's personal physician.
Valerie Weiss, thank you very much indeed. I want to bring in now Tom Mesereau. He was Michael Jackson's attorney during his 2005 child molestation trial, and he recommended the attorney representing the Jackson family in the wrongful death suit. Tom Mesereau, Conrad Murray has been the fall guy for Michael Jackson's death and is about to come out after serving more than 2 years in prison. But listening to his attorney there, clearly they feel, or he feels, pretty aggrieved that he was not directly responsible, that Michael Jackson was a grown man, 50-year-old man, who for decades had taken drugs and was determined to do so right up to the point that he died. What is your reaction to that?
Piers, propofol is used every minute of the day in hospitals all over the world. You talk to any anesthesiologist who's skilled at using propofol, they'll tell you it's a marvelous drug, it's a safe drug if used properly. The problem here is Conrad Murray wanted to make a lot of money, wanted to have a lot of fame, wanted to embark on the biggest comeback in entertainment history, and he ordered as I understand it, 4 gallons of propofol, was giving it to Michael Jackson without the proper equipment to monitor his heart rate, his heart, his circulation. He was absolutely derelict. He was negligent. He's lost his license, I believe, in 3 states or more. And to blame Michael Jackson because he was using a drug that is considered very safe when administered properly is ridiculous. He shirked his responsibilities. He tried to cover up the crime. He never told the paramedics he'd given him propofol. He never told the police. He went to UCLA Medical Center, didn't tell them he'd given propofol. He blames everybody but himself. He's the cause of his own problems, in my opinion. He
is obviously not the guy who has been directly accused of civil action. That is AEG, the company that was promoting Michael Jackson's tour. In terms of where this action itself, just taking it in isolation, what do you expect the verdict to be from all that we've heard in terms of evidence?
Well, I think there are 2 questions, Piers. One, did AEG, a large, sophisticated $8 billion corporation with a battery of sophisticated lawyers and consultants, did they assume the risk of Conrad Murray? Did they negligently hire him or supervise him or retain his services because they wanted to be part of this huge comeback, the biggest in entertainment history? And there are some emails where they talk about, you know, they're putting pressure on him allegedly through payment of his salary, which was $150,000 a month. They agreed to pay him. They sent an agreement for him to sign where they agreed to provide all the medical equipment and a medical assistant to him. They now say this was part of a negotiation that was never finalized. There are also emails where they want to remind him who's paying his salary. There's an email where they say they investigated his background. They then turned around and said they had not really investigated him. Why did they think they had to investigate him? And why did they even mention the term? I think in the end, AEG is going to be held responsible. If they are responsible, then the question is, what are the damages? You know, I knew Michael Jackson. I took over his criminal defense 9 months before his trial started. The trial itself was 5 months. This is the only man I ever met in my lifetime who could get up on a given day and spur of the moment, go anywhere in the world and make millions and millions of dollars. I think that the damage award could be close to $1 billion if they find that AEG assumed these risks and assumed these responsibilities. And I think the plaintiffs are going to win.
Tell me this though, Tom. You knew Michael Jackson very, very well, and he was a forceful character. He was also somebody that was well known to have taken drugs for a very long period of time. And as I keep saying, he was 50 years old. He's not a kid anymore. In terms of his own personal responsibility for the circumstances leading up to his death, where does Michael Jackson's own culpability come into play?
Well, look, there's been evidence that he obtained a lot of prescription drugs from pharmacies and physicians. There's been evidence that he used propofol, but he didn't die, Piers. You know, the people who were giving him these drugs and giving him propofol didn't kill him. As I understand it, it was used under safe circumstances by physicians who knew what they were doing. I think it was wrong. It's not a treatment for insomnia. I think the physicians that gave it to him were derelict, but nevertheless, it didn't take his life. This guy, Conrad Murray, was giving him propofol without equipment, without proper assistance, walked out of the room, was on the phone. I mean, I think he caused his death. If you look backwards and say Michael Jackson was taking prescription drugs and propofol, he didn't die from it.
Tom Mesereau, always good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Piers.
Coming next, like father, like daughter, Maverick Meghan McCain takes on the Tea Party and tells me why some Republicans think she's the Antichrist.
Now, I've been called a Republican in name only and a bad Republican almost daily.
Wednesday night, government shutdown, a world in crisis. Piers is one-on-one with a man who's faced it all before.